The ark was a sacred object in ancient Israelite religion. According to Exodus 25, verses 10 through 22, the ark was a box. It was made of acacia wood and overlaid with gold plating inside and out. And it measured 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits wide and high, so roughly 3 feet 9 inches, a little under 4 feet long, and 2 feet 3 inches, again, wide and high. So it wasn't a very big object. To look at it, you would not necessarily have been afraid of it, for sure. But the Bible connected it to the presence of Yahweh, the God of Israel. And so it was never to be touched by anyone. And this is why the Israelites carried it with the use of poles on their way to the Promised Land after the Exodus from Egypt. The ark had a lid as well. The Hebrew term for that is kaporet, and it was made of solid gold to which 2 cherubim, angelic cherubim, were fixed. English translations refer to the lid as the mercy seat, and the ark was also called God's footstool, so a seat and a footstool. Now the two conceptions are compatible since ancient thrones of the period had a footstool that was part of the throne. Now since there was no object more sacred to the ancient Israelites, you might wonder whatever happened to the Ark of the Covenant.
Now, everybody talks about the Ark of the Covenant. You may know there's all kinds of theories. There's at least 6 of them as where's the Ark of the Covenant. Some people feel it was taken by Menelik to Ethiopia during Solomon's apostasy. That's something you can disprove, but there are some people that hold that there.
There's a mystery involving the Ark of the Covenant. It was, in fact, lost. After the Israelites made it to the Promised Land, the ark eventually was installed into the Temple of Solomon during Solomon's reign. We know that from 1 Kings chapter 8. From that moment onwards, however, silence and mystery envelop the fate of the ark.
The ark was not, by the way, in Herod's temple. It had disappeared long before. There's another theory that it was taken by Shishak in 2 Chronicles 12. And that was the theory that they made the spoof movie Indiana Jones about on that premise.
Some scholars and students of the Ark mystery have suggested that the reason the Ark doesn't appear in the accounts of Nebuchadnezzar's invasion and the destruction of the Israelite temple is because it just wasn't there. They believe that the Ark was removed from the temple prior to the time of Nebuchadnezzar's invasion. Now, there are 2 candidate events for this theory. The first one we find in 1 Kings 14, 25 through 26, where we read that in the time of Rehoboam, the king of Judah in Jerusalem, quote, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. He took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took away everything, unquote. Now this is the theory adopted in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, with the twist that the ark was housed in Tanis, Egypt, which was obliterated in a sandstorm. The theory has adherents because it is reasoned that the ark must have been among the treasures of the house of the Lord. And the verses say that Shishak took away everything. There are problems with this theory, though. Shishak in the biblical narrative is presumed to be Shoshenq of Egypt in the standard chronology of both the Israelite monarchy and Egyptian history. The names may look similar, but some scholars don't believe they can be linguistically aligned. In addition, there are a number of contradictions between Shoshenq's account of his invasion into Judah and that of the Bible, including the fact that Jerusalem itself is not among the cities in Shoshenq's list of conquered sites. Lastly, later in biblical history, after the time of Shishak's raid, the ark apparently is still in Jerusalem. And we can discern this from Hezekiah's prayer in the Bible. The prayer suggests that Hezekiah is praying in the vicinity and direction of the ark. If this is the case, the Shishak invasion view falls. The treasures taken from the house of the Lord in 1 Kings 14 were apparently gold and silver. The temple served as a kind of treasury, not sacred objects or other sacred objects besides the ark.
Hidden by Jeremiah on Mount Nebo is another theory because it's mentioned in Maccabees.
There isn't a single direct reference made to it until the time of Jeremiah, who ministered in Judah, Israel's southern kingdom, right before Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon invaded Jerusalem and destroyed the city and the temple. Those events are described in 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah 52. Now, there are several other speculations about Ark survival that date to the Second Temple period, also known as the intertestamental period. One source in that period is the Jewish historian Eupolemus. The Ark, we are told in this source, was taken by the prophet Jeremiah, and this would, in theory, explain why it does not show up in biblical or Babylonian booty lists. The same belief is found in other ancient sources of the same Second Temple period. 2 Maccabees 2, verses 1 through 8, says accordingly, I'll read you a few lines of this. We read, "It was also contained in the same writing that the prophet, being warned of God, commanded the tabernacle and the ark to go with him as he went forth into the mountain where Moses climbed up and saw the heritage of God. And when Jeremy," that's Jeremiah, "came thither, he found a hollow cave wherein he laid the tabernacle and the ark and the altar of incense, and so stopped the door." Now, what this describes is Jeremiah, who lived right before Nebuchadnezzar's invasion, apparently according to this source, took the tabernacle, and there's a lot to that. I mean, this was a large structure, so he had all these objects in the tent, everything associated with it moved along with the ark to some cave near or at Mount Nebo. Again, this is just what the text says. Of course, no one has ever discovered the ark or anything associated with the tabernacle on that mountain.
Hidden on the Temple Mount. There are many people in Israel today that believe it's hidden under the Temple Mount. That's the official rabbinical view, by the way, but people who've really studied it doubt that for a number of reasons.
Now, this has led to some what I would call nonsensical views. For instance, there's the view of Tom Kreutzer and Ron Wyatt, who is now deceased. They tell stories of alternative views and how they went to search for the ark and how they found it, but again, the government stole it, or it was lost, or they couldn't find their way back. I mean, there's all sorts of variations about this. There are even some fuzzy photos. One of them has a nail in the ark, so we know that probably isn't the Ark of the Covenant.
Many people believe the ark was taken by the Babylonians, but there's no evidence for that.
Now, curiously, the ark is not mentioned in the grocery list of objects taken back to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, either in the list the Bible gives us or in the list that has survived in Babylonian records. The omission of the ark can't just be a scribal oversight either. The Ark of the Covenant is not mentioned when the Israelites returned to their homeland 70 years later and rebuilt the temple. That's in Ezra chapters 1 through 6. So both going to Babylon and coming back from Babylon, the ark is missing in the descriptions of either journey.
But there is an interesting allusion in the text in 2 Kings 21 and especially 2 Chronicles 35 that the ark was taken to Egypt during Manasseh's atrocities.
There are a number of ark survival theories. All of them focus on the idea that the Ark of the Covenant was removed by Israelite priests for its own protection before Nebuchadnezzar ever got into Babylon, or even before that. Now, the most well-known of these is that of Graham Hancock, but it's a view that he didn't invent. He articulates this in his book, The Sign and the Seal. Now, Hancock believes that the ark was removed before or during the reign of the wicked apostate King Manasseh. And after its removal, the Ark of the Covenant was taken to Elephantine, at one time a Jewish colony in Egypt. And then it was moved again, ultimately to Ethiopia.
And Manasseh was trying to wipe out Judaism, and the Levites took it out of the country. And so we have Manasseh's rampage. If you want to do your background on that, it's 2 Kings 21 and 2 Chronicles 34. Manasseh was king, and he tried to wipe out Judaism. The Levites, to protect Judaism, took the ark out of there. And he's replaced then by Josiah, who discovers a copy of the Torah that they did not destroy. He realizes how far they've fallen, and he organizes a big Passover celebration, and that's the context of 2 Chronicles 35. And so in 2 Chronicles 35, we have some strange passages about Josiah and Pharaoh Necho that we'll look at here in a minute. And then I'm going to suggest to you this will tie very clearly to the Ethiopian treasure in Acts chapter 8. And we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the mercy seat, which most people are not familiar with. Let's take a look at 2 Chronicles 35, starting at verse 3. And Josiah said unto the Levites that taught all Israel, which were holy unto the Lord, quote, put the holy ark in the house which Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel, did build. It shall not be a burden upon your shoulders. Serve now the Lord your God and his people Israel. So here's a reference to the Ark of the Covenant in the days of Josiah, which tells you that, that gets rid of a lot of those theories that we looked at earlier, frankly. Now, everybody assumes that when he tells the Levites to do that, they complied. It never says they complied, quite the contrary. The evidence is to the contrary. But the point is, we know that the ark is on the shoulders of the Levites. They're traveling with it. And why is all this going on? Shall not be a burden on your shoulders. So that's interesting. So it doesn't say they complied. The Levites had apparently taken the ark and the mercy seat, which is on, we tend to treat those as one thing, but they're really two things. The mercy seat is we would look at it like a lid on the Ark of the Covenant. They are both being transported by the Levites to get them out of the temple, to get it out of Jerusalem, in fact, to get it out of the country. And there they sought protection in Egypt. And by the way, this is confirmed archaeologically. This is not just speculation. I'll get to that in a minute. And so this is all to get, they resorted to this to get it out of the reach of Manasseh, who was trying to eliminate Mosaic Judaism. What you encounter if you get into this is a legend that is promoted in Ethiopia. That's not true. It's the Menelik legend, if you will. And the legend that they promote goes something like this. The Queen of Sheba visits Solomon, and in those days Ethiopia included Saudi Arabia, so the Queen of Sheba was Ethiopian. They had a son, Menelik I, who grows up there until he's 19. Then he returns to Ethiopia, and he brought with him the Ark of the Covenant, leaving behind a replica. That's the legend.
You say, well, why Ethiopia? Why would they do that? If there was a Jewish colony at Elephantine, why would they move it to Ethiopia? Well, the short answer is the Solomon Queen of Sheba story. The theory is that the Queen of Sheba was from Ethiopia, and when she visited Solomon, he gave her, according to 1 Kings 10:13, quote, all that she desired, unquote, which Hancock believes is a cryptic saying for, he got her pregnant, he's giving her a child. As the legend is told in the Ethiopic Kebra Nagast, which in translation means the glory of kings, the Queen of Sheba has Solomon's child and names him Menelik I. When the ark was taken out of the temple to prevent its defilement, it ultimately went to Ethiopia because Solomon's lineage was present in that country. Solomon was a descendant of David, to whose lineage God had promised the dynastic throne, according to 2 Samuel 7.
They apparently have been guarding this object that he brought there for over 2,400 years. That's the view. This legend isn't just a furious legend. They have put this in the constitution of the government of Ethiopia. And so it's you actually find, now this was promoted by the early kings in Ethiopia so they could claim Solomonic descent. Okay, and so that's its origin. Now we happen to know, if you know your Bible, you know that's not true, because Josiah is much later, and the biblical record has the ark as a subject separate from all of this. This is a legend that is.
The Ethiopian view of what happened to the ark is my personal favorite, and so it's going to make me sad to tell you about how many problems it actually has, but it has numerous problems. First, ancient Sheba was not Ethiopia. Rather, it is the land of Saba in the southwest Arabian Peninsula, likely modern Yemen. So that's a significant disconnect. Second, the Kebra Nagast, the holy book I alluded to earlier, was written 1,500 years after the events of Solomon and Sheba, so it is far removed from being a contemporary resource. Third, the biblical terminology of Solomon giving the queen, quote, her desire, unquote, does not elsewhere ever speak of pregnancy. So this meaning, the idea that Solomon got her pregnant, is nothing but speculation. Fourth, Graham Hancock specifically depends quite a bit on a medieval source to prop up this theory. The source is called Churches and Monasteries of Egypt. Again, the content of it is as old as the early 13th century. The book is written by Abu Saleh, in which the writer says that he saw the ark. The ark witnessed by Abu Saleh had Christian decorations on it, in other words, crosses, something that the actual ark didn't have. And given the fact that no one in the Old Testament was to ever touch the ark, it was transported with poles, remember, it is highly doubtful that what Abu Saleh saw was the real Ark of the Covenant. There's actually very little evidence to support of the ark surviving and winding up in Ethiopia. And so, yeah, I'm disappointed, but there are alternative theories.
And because most people who know their Bible know this legend can't be true, they dismiss the idea that the ark is in Ethiopia. What they overlook is that even though this legend's not true, the ark got down there by a different path.
And so we have a mystery on our hands. It's not listed in any source, such as the Bible, ancient cuneiform tablets, nothing as far as what happened to it. So other than being taken in a military invasion, what other explanations have scholars and other researchers offered for what might have happened to the ark?
And that's the surprise, and you'll find it in the text. So, see, this traditional legend is not compatible with the biblical record, since the ark is referred to in the subsequent days of Josiah, as we just looked at it. And again, what's overlooked is that the ark may have arrived there by another series of events which are alluded to later in that same chapter, in 2 Chronicles 35. And we'll take a look at this here. Looking at 2 Chronicles 35, starting verse 20. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, he's trying to organize this big Passover, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates. So get the picture. Pharaoh Necho of Egypt, at this time, the Assyrian Empire is starting to fall apart. So Pharaoh Necho is going there to get some assets. So he came up to fight. The Pharaoh Necho is going to fight against the Assyrian Empire, which is an enemy of Israel. Got the picture, okay? And Josiah went out against him. That's weird. Here your enemy of your enemy is your friend. It should be. You would think that Pharaoh Necho is going against the Assyrian Empire, that Israel would be glad to see that happen. No, something very strange going on here. Josiah went out against him, and this puzzles Pharaoh Necho. In verse 21, but he sent ambassadors to him, that Pharaoh Necho sends ambassadors to Josiah. He said, what have I to do with thee, O thou king of Judah? I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. Now notice what Pharaoh Necho is saying here. For God commanded me to make haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God who is with me, that he destroy thee not. Notice the surprise and the claim of Pharaoh Necho. He feels he's doing what God told him to do, and what on earth is Josiah doing obstructing him? One of the questions I have to ask. What possibly would motivate Josiah to go against Pharaoh Necho? He has just a few verses earlier asked the Levites to return the ark to where it belongs. They didn't comply. He's going against Pharaoh Necho because he wants that ark back. You with me so far? That's a speculation. Let's see what happens here. And so Necho says, I'm not coming against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I war, for God commanded me. I want you to notice the next verse. It's even more. Notice the next verse is not a quote from Pharaoh Necho. It's a quote by the chronicler that's writing this. Nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself that he might fight with him, and hearkened not unto the words of Necho from the mouth of God, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. Subtlety, but it's important. You notice that verse 22 is not part of the quote of Pharaoh Necho, it's a quote by the chronicler. So if you take the Bible seriously, you can take that as being true. Are you with me? Pharaoh Necho is expressing a view. This is giving you a fact that he hearkened unto the words of Necho from the mouth of God. Wait a minute. How could Pharaoh Necho be hearing from the mouth of God? This isn't a boast, this is a comment of the chronicler. Well, anyway, it goes on then in the next verse, and the archers shouted at King Josiah, and the king said to his servants, "Have me away, for I'm sore wounded." It turns out Josiah gets killed in that battle. And the rest goes on grieving the loss of this very popular young king, Josiah. He was quite a guy, good guy. So that's a tragedy. But how would Pharaoh Necho hear from the mouth of God? Because the Levites had set up the tabernacle on Elephantine Island, which was the main palace of Pharaoh Necho in those days. From the mouth of God. Okay. I want you to notice verse 22 is a declaration of the chronicler, not Pharaoh Necho. That's a critical thing to get this in focus. What are the issues here? Why did Josiah persist attacking Pharaoh Necho? My presumption, but it's my presumption, that he was after the ark. Why did Pharaoh Necho feel that God was on his side? Apparently the Levites had set up shop down there. Could Pharaoh Necho have had instructions from the mouth of God is the question. You know, when you study the passage broader, you'll discover Josiah always got his instructions through the prophetess Huldah rather than the Levitical priesthood. Why? Because the Levites were gone. So he gets his guidance from the prophetess Huldah, and that's fine, but it isn't the normal routine. So something's going on here. Now there's something else you need to know that most of your commentaries fail to highlight. Pharaoh Necho was another one of these pharaohs that wasn't Egyptian. See, Pharaoh is a title. Pharaoh Necho, guess what? Was an Ethiopian. It's known as the Ethiopian dynasty. So suddenly the fog is lifting here a little bit, isn't it? You with me? And you can check that out. I encourage you to do that. What we've stumbled into here is a documented tradition. And that in 642 BC, Elephantine Island is an island in the Nile that at that time was the headquarters of Pharaoh Necho. And in a couple of centuries later, in 470 BC, it moves to Tanakurkas Island in Lake Tana, Ethiopia. And then in 330, it moves to Axum. We'll track this here. And it's presently at St. Mary's of Zion Church, whatever it is they've been guarding. And they believe the Ethiopians believe it's destined to be presented to the Messiah when he rules on Mount Zion. There's a whole chapter on this that we went through back in chapter 18 of Isaiah. And it's also alluded in several other places, Zephaniah 3:10 and other places. So let's take a look at this. So apparently the Levites, to get it out of harm's way, go down to Elephantine Island, the headquarters of Egypt, and seek protection from Pharaoh Necho. And Elephantine Island was a fortified capital, and the ark apparently stays there from 630 BC through about 430 BC, about 2 centuries. And that's documented archaeologically, by the way. And so it was an early advanced outpost of Egypt. It was their southernmost border town, the fortified installation serving as the first dynasty fortress. It had military importance during the 25th dynasty, the so-called Ethiopian dynasty. And there was a temple to Yod-Heh-Vav that served the Jewish colony prior to the Persian occupations of 525 to 404. And you can find this confirmed in the official guidebook by the German Institute of Archaeology in Cairo back in 1998. So this has that substance. Well, it stays there for about 2 centuries. Then it moves down to Lake Tana. Way south is a gigantic lake, Lake Tana, and it's full of a lot of islands. And one of those islands is Tanakurkas Island. And it stays there for 800 years. Until it, and then it finally, and we visited that, by the way, several times. And this is one of the monks there showing me something he's very proud of. and he has an Ethiopian Bible, and in their Bible they have reckoning of Mary and Joseph and the baby visiting back, if you know your New Testament, and they have a record of them visiting Tanakirkus Island. And so it remains there for 800 years until it finally moves to Axum, where it presumably is there still today. And so it stays there until they feel they are committed to guarding it until the Messiah rules on Mount Zion. And when you go to Axum, there's a place called the St. Mary's Church of Zion. It's a sort of an unimposing fortress kind of thing, but that goes down underground, and there are tunnels all the way to the Red Sea. They've been guarding this thing for over 2,000 years. So and they take that very, very seriously. And so a continuing trust, 2,400-year history of a sacred relic guarded by the Ethiopians from its tenure in Elfenbein Island back then to Tanakirkus Island, Lake Tana, and its present location at its compound at Axum. And they believe that they've been charged to deliver it to the Messiah when he rules at Mount Zion. And that's what drives them.
We also have Second Temple sources, though, that take a dramatically different turn. One Second Temple source, for instance, says that the Ark of our Covenant has been plundered. That is from 2 Esdras 10:22. Now, why would it say that? Why would you have a Second Temple period Jewish writer say that basically the Ark was taken or destroyed, plundered? Why would they say that? Again, because of all of this other information about the mystery of the Ark. Well, that source actually comes up with that idea because the Bible suggests it. Now let's start with a passage in Jeremiah, a contemporary of the destruction of the temple. In the book of Jeremiah, the prophet envisions a day in the distant future when the exiles of Judah who are about to be carried off to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar get to return to their homeland. And he writes, and this is from Jeremiah 3:14-16, quote, "Return, O faithless children, declares the Lord, for I am your master. I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and I will bring you to Zion. And I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding. And when you have multiplied and been fruitful in the land in those days, declares the Lord, they shall no more say, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. It shall not come to mind or be remembered or missed. It shall not be made again." Now the key verse here is that last verse, verse 16, where the prophet describes the lament of people over the loss of the Ark. There is simply no reason for people to desire that the Ark of the Covenant be made again, or that they would miss it, if it had not been lost. Now Lamentations 2, verse 1, this is a book also associated with the prophet Jeremiah, also suggests the loss of the Ark. That verse says, "How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool in the day of his anger." Now, the entire book of Lamentations is a series of laments about the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple. Elsewhere, of course, you'll recall that the Ark of the Covenant was called the footstool of the Lord, for instance, in 1 Chronicles 28:2. So Lamentations 2:1 says the Lord didn't remember his footstool, the Ark, at the time of his anger, which strongly suggests that it was lost, either plundered or destroyed. Lastly, the prophet Ezekiel had a lengthy vision of the future temple after the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. This you can read in Ezekiel 40-48. One thing you'll notice if you read those chapters in Ezekiel, that temple has no ark. It's entirely absent. Now, ark searchers contend that the ark survived so that one day it could be rediscovered and brought back to Jerusalem. But Ezekiel certainly isn't thinking in that direction. So unfortunately, in the end, the most coherent, and I would say the most biblical view, is the one that we really don't like. And that is the Ark of the Covenant was destroyed, either intentionally or maybe accidentally, by Nebuchadnezzar's army during the invasion. I mean, they would not necessarily have known what was in the temple if they just randomly burned it down. The verses that you actually see in Scripture that talk about the lament for the Ark and suggest the fate of the Ark point in this direction. Now, again, they're not conclusive, but this is what Scripture suggests, and therefore I think it is the most coherent view that we have to offer. And that would be the reason that the Ark of the Covenant isn't mentioned in the booty lists of things that Nebuchadnezzar took back, either in the Bible or in his own records. It was destroyed.